We're very pleased to have a great group of presenters this afternoon with a variety of experience. And I'm going to introduce them first, and then their more complete bios are in the app that goes with this conference. Our first speaker will be Etrusia Gibbs. She's from the Orphans Court of Philadelphia. I feel like there's a feedback, or is that my imagination? Is it okay? Okay? And her official title is Guardianship Compliance Investigator, and she's the enforcer. Dan Buzzard is recently hired as the Washington County Court Administrator, but he spent 27 years as a supervisor of guardianships in Allegheny County, which is, of course, our second largest county in terms of volume of guardianship cases, and actually any case. And I've known Dan for a long time, and he's been really helpful going back all the way to the GTS when it was created. Visiting from Massachusetts, and another recipient of a federal grant, is Judge Evelyn Pastos and Samantha Kensa, and they are from the Probate and Family Court in Massachusetts, and they're going to share with us what they have been doing with their grant money in terms of monitoring guardianships. Then known to many of you is Judge Richard Hughes from Luzerne County, and he is among his other duties as Orphans Court. And then lastly, I'm very pleased to have with us Matthew Newcomer, an attorney, actually an assistant U.S. attorney from Philadelphia, and he is the deputy chief of the Economic Crimes, Asset Recovery, and Financial Litigation. And he will be telling us what can be done and is being done on the federal level. So let's get started. When I think about monitoring, I think that we obviously start with the fact that you're going to review annual reports. And so what are some of the methods that you do in terms of reviewing these reports for suspected abuse? And where do you go from them? Etrusia?
Good morning. Good afternoon. One of the things that I do consistently when I review reports is to make sure the assets of the person, the principal, has not reduced from the previous year to this year, obviously. Another thing that I do is if the person owns property that was listed on the guardian's inventory, use the database of the city of Philadelphia for our property assessments. I check to make sure the property is still in the IC's name. It hasn't been sold, hasn't been deeded off for $1. We've all seen that. Somebody signs the house over to themselves for $1. If I do see that, first thing I do, of course, is tell the judge, and we issue a review hearing. I also utilize every database available. City of Philadelphia, I use the criminal docket, I use the civil docket, I use Megan's Law. My former life was a banker. I was a banker for 18 years before I started with PCA and then came to the courts. So I'm used to skip tracing. I don't know if skip tracing is. I told my fearless leader, Judge Wood Skipper, I said, I really need a database for skip tracing to find people, to find guardians. And she got me Westlaw. Works. It works. Works great. It doesn't always tell you if the person is deceased, but we can use the state database for that. But it works. It helps me find people, finds their phone numbers, find their addresses. I am just a good researcher, good at looking things up and finding things. I'm also good in different states, in different counties. So I have a customer, and I see that has property in Sarasota, Florida. I don't have access to their database. I called them. I'm from Philadelphia. Can I get access to the database? And they said, sure, for 3 days. Thank you. Signed. They faxed me over something. I signed it, faxed it back to them. They gave me access to the database for 3 days just to make sure that property was still in the IC's name and they still owned it and it was worth what they say it was worth. And I signed off. And every year, if I have to go back, I can just call them and say, hey, I'm calling from another municipality. Can I please have access to your database? And they say yes. I never heard a no. I don't believe I have ever heard a no. Whatever I'm going for, I gotta go. I'm gonna ask you, I'm gonna keep asking you. Let me have it. And they usually give it to me. I just use everything I have. I don't know how it works, but it works.
Dan, you want to tell us about Allegheny County experiences?
Yes, thank you, Judge. Allegheny County, like Philadelphia, is blessed with a lot of resources, a team of people to do what Etrusia mentioned that she does. In Allegheny, they do it almost as well as she does, so it's pretty good. The one thing that stands out to me, because I was the supervisor of the department, was there were two kinds of problems we came upon. And one was problems that were raised in the reports. If it was a flag for an income discrepancy, sometimes a guardian would write in the report at the end, I can't do this anymore, or my health is failing, or something. And those were relatively easy because you read the report, you look at the flag, and you assign someone to deal with it, and you deal with it. But the other kinds of problems that GTS brought to the surface was the cases where no reports are filed. And when no reports are filed, something's wrong. Now, we migrated about 3,000 cases when we started GTS, and we went through
8,000.
them. 8,000. It may have been more than 3,000. It was thousands, and we went through them, and a lot of them the person had passed away, 10 years earlier. A lot of them we were able to filter out. So right away our database got updated, and so GTS was great in helping us to update everything. But going forward, when a guardian doesn't file a report, something's wrong. And we learned that a lot of people that are going to misappropriate money, for example, it's a lot easier to not file the report than to file it and lie. So we took special care with the cases where no reports were filed to, number one, where is that ward? If they're in a facility, it's a simple phone call to the facility. Are they okay? Fine. If they're not in the facility and no reports are being filed, I would tell an investigator, drop what you're doing, you're leaving right now, go check on this person. Because if the report's not being filed, what else, is not right about that situation? And like Etrusia said, we did a lot of searches. We were doing everything we legally possibly could to try to find people, both guardians and wards. But the cases where no report is filed is a red flag that something's wrong. And maybe they just moved to Arizona and they didn't bother to tell us, and the person's fine. But a lot of the problems we found came out of the cases where there's no report to be filed. That's been my experience. And as I said, GTS has been a godsend, a wonderful tool. It does exactly what it was designed to do. There's a reason it's an award-winning program. It does very well what it's supposed to do. And it's brought a lot more work to us and a lot more problems we've solved. Our district attorney called me recently and said, why am I getting all these referrals from you guys in the past couple of years? Well, it's because of GTS. We're finding more problems, but that's a good thing.
Thank you. I forgot to introduce Mary Catherine Scott, who was on a panel yesterday. She is a professor at Widener Commonwealth, and she will be speaking to the next section that we're going to talk about is, since the reports of the guardian of the person in the estate are only filed annually, what are you doing in your courts to assure that there is not abuse or exploitation in the interim of when those reports come in? So, Mary Catherine, why don't you tell us what you've been doing, and then we'll move on to Massachusetts experience.
Sure. Thank you, Judge. I think one of the things I want to distinguish is my co-presenters are talking about the reports and the reports that are filed by the guardians. However, those of you that heard me yesterday or have heard me talk about the Dauphin County Pro Bono Guardian Monitor Program, those are the reports that I'm talking about. And these are reports where volunteers in Dauphin County, attorneys, are given pro bono credit through the Bar Association to act as the eyes and ears of the court and visit with the guardian, visit with the ward, review the financial documents, review the reports from the guardian, and physically go to the home, go to the nursing home, go to any facility to meet with the parties, meet with both people, to find out if there's any irregularities, any issues with the guardianship, and then we file a report to the court who can then decide if a review hearing is necessary. And it's a very simple program, and it's one that has been since 2007 in our county. very widely received, obviously from the court, but also from practitioners that see this as not only an excellent way to get pro bono credits, and there's no expertise needed. A lot of our government local in Harrisburg, or a lot of our local attorneys will become pro bono monitors because of the fact that there's no expertise needed. And 1 hour, 2 hours, once a year, we will go and visit with the parties. This is something I've been doing since its inception of the program in 2007, and quite recently, 2 years ago, our law school and the clinic that I run partnered with Dauphin County Orphans Court. So now law students are able to, under my supervision as well, view the reports that are filed, also meet with the guardian, meet with the ward, and again to really flag some of these issues that might come up with neglect or exploitation. And I think I gave a scenario yesterday of one of the many opportunities that I've had to be a part of review hearings where there has been issues.
Thank you. So Judge Pastos, do you want to start us off for what you've been doing with your money in Massachusetts?
I do. I will. First of all, I just want to say how wonderful it is to be here today and to be able to hear what Pennsylvania is doing. I think everyone in this room should be incredibly proud that you have a court system that prioritizes these case types. To have an elder justice court is phenomenal. And I speak about Pennsylvania to our Chief Justice, so much so that he said, stop talking about Pennsylvania's elder justice court. And I said, well, I will when Massachusetts has an elder justice court. We do have a fiduciary litigation session, but someday I hope we have what you have here because it's amazing. You're going to hear from our program manager, now a project director for our next elder justice grant, what we have done as far as the 2021 grant monies that we got in Massachusetts. She's going to talk to you specifically about how we consolidated the oversight function of the court, but I just want to tell you a little bit about how this all came about in Massachusetts. In 2009, Massachusetts adopted a version of the Uniform Probate Code, known as the Massachusetts Uniform Probate Code, or as I like to say, the M is often a mess because the stuff we adopted wasn't necessarily helpful, or the changes we made to the UPC. But in any event, that law specifically required the Massachusetts courts to develop a system. It was a mandatory obligation to develop a system to monitor guardians and conservators of adults. And while that is a wonderful statute to have in place, the legislature never gave us any money to create that system. So what we did for about 10 to 12 years was really work what I call a patchwork system. We used volunteer attorneys, we used court staff where we could, but across Massachusetts, we now know at least that we have over 30,000 or about 30,000 active guardianship cases. So while some divisions, some counties did a really good job of monitoring, many, those that had bigger caseloads, did not do a good job at all. Ultimately, it came to the administrative office under the Chief Justice, his responsibility to see what we could do to improve it. So that's where the Elder Justice Innovation Grant came in. And I'm going to let Sam talk about that in more detail now.
So I see a lot of heads nodding already as soon as she said there was no funding to do any of this. So I'm sure a lot of you here, if you weren't already very familiar with the Elder Justice Innovation Grant and how Pennsylvania put that to work, I won't bore you with a lot of details about the grant itself, but more about what we did with it. So our overarching goal was oversight, how to actually conduct that court monitoring. So we boiled that down to 5 objectives, which were collecting data, collaborating with others in Massachusetts, other state departments, other organizations that were leaders in this type of adult welfare, creating a centralized office, which we call the Office of Adult Guardianship and Conservatorship Oversight, OAGCO. Not a beautiful acronym. It doesn't make anything fun to say, but when you Google it, it is the first search result, so that's great. We wanted to establish some type of ombudsperson, and we wanted to increase petitions for restorations of rights. So with that oversight and monitoring goal in mind, obviously creating the centralized office was the main product of this grant. But in thinking about monitoring in between how that office is conducting those reviews of filed reports on a year-to-year basis, the ombudsperson is a really key component of bridging a gap between the court and the public. And the public can be anyone, guardians and conservators, the adult under the guardianship or conservatorship, an interested person who cares about the welfare of that adult. And we quickly realized we didn't quite have the ability to create a typical ombudsperson service where we could do some case management and field concerns and complaints and do investigations, but instead we call it the Ombudsperson Service Program so that we can at least bring all of the resources, all of the court procedural knowledge that any of those people involved in the case or not involved in the case need to know. So if I can hog another minute of our time, I will kick back over to Judge Patsos to talk about specifically some of the tools that we utilize in Mass to let any of those interested persons or party case members bring information to the court when they have concerns.
Can I ask you real quickly, what qualifications did you look for in your ombudsman? I mean, did they need to be a lawyer, a social worker?
So because we pivoted away from a typical ombudsman, we have no one appointed person who serves in that role, and that's why we call it the Ombudsperson Service Program. So instead, it's a function of our entire oversight office where we can collect inquiries. We don't call them complaints, but where any inquiry can be sent at any point in time to our email address, and we host a monthly Zoom session that's open forum, and any person can pop in to ask questions of our staff. We always have someone legal on our team as well, just to field questions. They can bring their docket number and ask something very specific. They can ask general questions about the rights of the person, the role of the guardian, what form do I need? And it's still a fledgling project because our office was just established in February of this year, but we've had a great response so far to that email address in particular.
I'm just going to add to that. So one of the things that we first struggled with, although we originally wanted an ombudsperson to be identified, our judges felt that that was potentially, and I believe they're correct, ex parte communication issues that could be going on. So for that reason, we made this more of a resource for individuals that might think that there's some type of abuse or neglect going on. And so we have a lot of self-represented litigants in Massachusetts, especially even in this area. And so when they reach out to the OSP, they're able to get guidance on what to do procedurally. So in Massachusetts, if somebody outside of the annual reporting process thinks that there might be some abuse or neglect going on, they could file a petition for removal. I'm sure something like that exists in Pennsylvania as well. And then if it's an emergency, they could also file with that petition an emergency to get before a judge and have it heard. So that's one way that can be done, and that's how the OSP assists in that regard. There are other ways for our court system to address potential emergencies outside of the annual review program. In Massachusetts, we have, and I know we're one of only a few states that actually does this, but by our statute, anytime an adult under guardianship has to be treated with antipsychotic medication, there's a whole substituted judgment, it's called, determination that has to be done by the court. It's what's considered to be extraordinary authority for the court to grant for an individual to be treated with antipsychotic medication, as well as other types of specialized treatment. And so that's a whole process that has to be done with a hearing before a judge. The statute, the law in Massachusetts, and when it's a substituted judgment or an extraordinary authority request, requires, it's the only time unfortunately it does, but it requires the appointment of counsel, and that's mandatory. And that also requires an annual review. So during the annual review of this extraordinary treatment that's been authorized by the court, it's another opportunity for a judge to see if anything less than kosher is going on in that case. So oftentimes things do come up during those annual reviews. Another way that things come up for the court outside of the annual review process is if our Adult Protective Services or Disabled Persons Protection Commission, DPPC, they have the authority under a couple different statutes to bring an action in the court. And sometimes we have a very low rate of those coming in, which is, I think, a good sign. But when they come in, they get prioritized, and oftentimes they result in a removal of a guardian and another substitute being put in place. And then now with this federal grant, the OSP is another opportunity.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the next topic is what can you or should you do as a judge if you uncover suspected abuse during a court hearing or through reading any of the reports that have been referred to you? Judge Hughes?
Thank you very much, Judge Allen. First, I want to give a shout out to Nicole Clappett, who's sitting right back here, who was with me for 13 years, my first 13 years on the bench, and was really instrumental in working with me to put our protocols in place. And as you'll hear, I'm going to go over 3 cases where we actually did uncover bad things happening in guardianships, and Nicole was the reviewer who discovered all those and brought those to my attention. So as Dan said, it's the GTS system has been an absolute game changer. In Luzerne County, very large elderly population, lots of guardianships, and before GTS we had no idea as to how many we had, there was no mechanism for tracking them. We didn't even know whether our incapacitated individuals were deceased or not. That's all changed, obviously, which has been wonderful. And I imagine by now, all counties, I certainly hope so, have someone designated to be the reviewer. In my case, Nicole was reviewing the cases, and now that she is going on to be a certified guardian, we have another full-time reviewer in Luzerne County. So by the time something gets to the courts, to the judge, obviously a lot of things have happened first. The flags have come up on the GTS system. The reviewer looks at them, tries to resolve them, makes phone calls, letters go out, and I would say generally they get resolved, right? They're just mistakes made or someone didn't file a report inadvertently. But there are cases where they must bring them to us, and we then issue a rule returnable to have the person show cause why they should not be removed. And that's what I want to go over with you. Some of my friends here who I serve on committees with will know the first story I'm telling because it happened so quickly after we got GTS up and running. It was really within the first few months. But the GTS put up lots of flags that reports weren't being filed in this case. And so we were reaching out trying to find the guardian, and we actually had found, I think it was through the district attorney's office, that the guardian had relocated down to somewhere in New Jersey. And we got an address, and we contacted the police department in that area and asked them to do a welfare check at the residence because we had no contact with this individual. So there's one example. Obviously, I think utilizing your police force is an excellent way to get things started. And I've found in every case that they're very willing to do welfare checks. Well, in this case, they did the welfare check, and they found out that the woman, the incapacitated person was not there. The woman said she couldn't handle him and had driven him back to public square in our county, Luzerne County, and just dropped him on the street. That had been about a month earlier, which prompted, of course, we had removed this person, but it prompted using the police again, and eventually found that individual, thankfully alive, okay, on the streets of Wilkes-Barre, and now with an appropriate guardian in place, one of our fine agencies, nonprofits, the incapacitated person is being cared for very well. So that would be one example of utilizing police. We had another case that involved where I was actually talking to Matt earlier, that not the smartest person reporting, because it was pretty clear that their numbers were all off on their report, which would be fairly easy to not do that. But so we've called this individual in. It's the brother, and he couldn't answer any of the questions as to where this money was going, and it appeared that it was missing about $188,000. Removed him, and in that case, referred it to our district attorney's office. And I think that's an excellent resource to have. We work very closely, as I know some of the others do, with their DA's office. Our district attorney has been terrific in actually assigning one of their detectives just to work with us, which is extremely helpful if you can't find an incapacitated person, or if you're getting mail suddenly returning when you're sending things out to the Guardian. They've been great on that. Unfortunately, I've checked on this actually this morning to see what the status was, and it's still being held. They're trying to allot funding for a forensic audit. And I, again, had this conversation with Matthew, and he'll talk a little bit about it, but I hadn't even thought about the fact that in so many in the financial world, there are oftentimes things that happen across state lines that might give the ability to refer it out of Luzerne County and into the federal world, where the resources might be greater to have an internal forensic audit. The last case I just want to mention to you all is one that we had that got some attention in the press up in our area. Again, GTS picked it up for failing to file reports. We brought the mother of the child in, and eventually she hired an attorney, and she sought to come back in as guardian, and she actually seemed fine, but we kept her out as being guardian at that point. And it was a good thing we did, because once we had a nonprofit in one of the facilities where her daughter was going to, had a mechanism as to who they were going to call when they started to see bruising and things. It turns out that she was being very badly abused. And in fact, that led to criminal charges against the mother. The mother was sentenced to 2 years incarceration. So it was a really bad case. And again, GTS is what started that whole process of us. Initially came up without the reports, but then that triggered the getting a nonprofit in, and that seemed to get the agency someone to call on that case. So those are three examples. Again, we use in Luzerne County primarily, when we have a situation, we use our district attorney's office, and we rely heavily on the police department. I do want to point out one thing that I think is kind of interesting, and it just happened this last week. I was lecturing with Judge Ruggiero from up in Lackawanna County and Attorney John Kennedy, who have all been lecturing here. And we were invited to go out to the Pennsylvania Coalition of Healthcare and Living Communities. And when I got the invitation, I think from AOPC, or to go out there, happy to do it, but I was sort of, when I got there and saw who we were lecturing to, I really couldn't figure out why that would be important or what we were doing there, because it just didn't seem like we fit, but I was really wrong. And what I realized was that these groups of nursing home providers, and they're very interested in guardianship. They don't know much about guardianship. And what Keith Hinkle and I were talking about this morning was, it's an avenue that I hope we continue, because in terms of reporting, we see what's on the paper from GTS, but these are the people who actually are there and see whether or not a guardian is actually, they might say they're coming to see the incapacitated person, every 2 weeks or something, and we don't know, right? So they know, or they know if the person's not showing up for the care plans, or they know if obviously they know, we hear about it if finances aren't being paid. But I think it's something that in the future, as Keith and I were talking about, to sort of come up with a good mechanism for reporting from those facilities on a quick basis right to the courts would be a good way to follow through on that. So that's how we do it in Luzerne County, and again, it's been the GTS has been terrific.
Thank you. Judge Patkos, could you tell us some of your experiences in Massachusetts?
So in Massachusetts, there's a wide range of allegations of abuse and neglect, I think. And so if something's coming in before me and it's not rising to the level as what you talked about, which we have seen those types of cases too, the first thing I'm going to do is appoint counsel for the adult with a guardian or conservator. It's not mandatory, the appointment of counsel in Massachusetts, as I said, unless you're talking about requesting extraordinary treatment, but I do have the authority, discretionary authority to do it. We have public counsel, it's called Committee for Public Counsel Service, that's our state defenders, public defenders, so I would contact and have somebody from CPCS be appointed to represent this individual, and they're trained in mental health issues. Second of all, I have the authority to appoint what's called a guardian ad litem, as you all talked about earlier. And in Massachusetts, and that term gets confused by a lot of people because sometimes it's a next friend, sometimes it's an investigator. But for me, in this type of scenario, I would appoint a GAL for the purpose of investigating and reporting back and making recommendations and suggestions. I don't believe I can use our probation department for that, although I would love to, because I can use them when there's allegations of abuse or neglect involving children. But for some reason, adults under guardianship and conservatorship don't get added into that. Not that I don't obviously agree with that. But those are my options. If I believe that there's enough before me that I'm not going to continue to have that guardian represent this individual, I have the authority to suspend them during the investigation and appoint a special guardian or a special conservator in their place. It doesn't remove them, because I may not have enough information to remove them yet, but under Massachusetts law, I can appoint this, what is in essence a temporary, but they call it a special. So it's a special guardian, and it suspends the permanent or temporarily, the permanent appointed fiduciary while this investigation is going on. But one thing I want to just make a comment about is, and I've seen some pretty bad cases, a couple that rise to what you were talking about. One involved, actually, in Massachusetts, we have a lot of professional guardians and professional conservators. Just to be clear, under our law, conservators are fiduciaries who have authority over management of money. We've bifurcated the two roles under the MUPC, so a guardian is just of the person, conservator now is of the property. But we have a lot of professionals, and there was a case that we had where an attorney was appointed conservator in over 50 cases across Massachusetts in different divisions, different counties. And it turned out just in one of the particular proceedings where a judge asked a question about the annuity, and it turned out that this conservator was also getting commission for the annuities, and so it was self-dealing. That ended up opening up a very big can of worms, and it went all the way up to, started at that point, we have to report to the Board of Bar Overseers, which is a licensing authority in Massachusetts. From there, they supported it. It went to the Supreme Judicial Court, who ultimately, within I think like a 4 or 5 month period, disbarred this attorney because it was happening in over 50 of those cases. And one thing I want to say is, one thing that I'm always conscious of is those individuals who don't have close family members by to keep an eye out. We sometimes refer to them as the unbefriended. And oftentimes I see a similar fact pattern. It tends to be a male who perhaps never got married, but did amazing investments early on, probably because they never had kids. And so, or they had veterans' monies coming in, and they did really great work in the stock market, and yet they have nobody overseeing them. And they tend to be, I find, really vulnerable as they get older. So I've seen that on more than one occasion. But I think as a judge, because of the stuff I've seen in the different roles I've had with the probate and family court, I'm incredibly conscious now as a judge of what I can do at the petitioning stage when it's first before me, so that maybe I can, do what I can at the petitioning stage so that these issues don't prop up later. So what are those things I can do? I can keep an eye out and make sure that the right parties have been notified. I can't tell you how many times I have seen already in my 2-3 months on the bench, individuals in cases where notice isn't proper. They've left off, and it tends to be, I don't want, I'm not dissing on the professionals, but, in nursing, when we have nursing homes petitioning or hospitals petitioning, they often leave out many family members, and I won't allow it. I'll stop it right there. I'll make them come back. It's just how it is. And other things, when you're talking about having control over money, in Massachusetts at least, one of the few things I can do at the petitioning stage is ensure that the correct bond is filed. And to me, depending on the amount of funds that's being managed, that's a corporate surety bond. Massachusetts allows a personal surety bond or a waiver of sureties. I can't tell you how many times I get a waiver. One in particular, it was a $3 million estate. And I said, counsel, are you serious? No. You need a corporate surety bond, because if something goes with that money, something happens, that's one of the best protections I can do to get the money back. Because once it's gone, it's gone. So I think it's really important for judges to, I know we're all busy, our dockets are insane, but to take the time at the petitioning stage to ensure that the right procedural safeguards are in place.
Thank you. I'd like to turn it over now to Matthew Comer, and newcomer, and he will tell us what resources are available in the U.S. Attorney's Office. He has a PowerPoint program he's going to share with us.
Hello. Oh, that works.
I know.
It's a little jarring. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Newcomer. As Judge Ott said, I work for the Department of Justice out of Philadelphia in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. So that means I'm one of the federal prosecutors that covers the 9 counties in the Eastern District: Berks, Bucks, Lancaster, Delco, Montco, Chester, Lehigh, and Northampton. I think I got them all. We prosecute federal crimes, and that includes our unit. I'm the deputy chief of the economic crime unit. It's about 17 prosecutors that we oversee, and we do a lot of financial crimes, including elder fraud and elder abuse. Now, I say elder fraud and elder abuse. These types of schemes I'm going to talk about here aren't limited to victimizing the elderly. But for many reasons, the elderly tend to be the ones who are victimized most often. And just wanted to say at the outset, one, I appreciate the opportunity from Judge Ott and her team to talk here today. I think there's a clear intersection here between the work you folks are doing to make sure guardianships are running appropriately and responsibly, and the work that we're doing at the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is to try to hold the wrongdoers accountable, whether it be guardians or the bad actors that are trying to defraud them. I also need to say, because I need to say this at every speaking event, I work for the Department of Justice, but the views here today are mine alone. I'm not here in an official capacity to advise you on DOJ policy. This is just my views. So with that being said, let me tell you, well, I'm going to do a few things here. I want to start by covering just the prevalence of elder fraud. These stats may or may not surprise you. I think they really speak to how prevalent this issue is. I'm going to tell you about some of the types of schemes we're seeing, the most frequent types of schemes we're seeing, and then I want to talk about tools you can use and ways to report the fraud, whether you're a judge, a guardian, a lawyer, or any other citizen. And obviously, this advice is helpful for guardians and lawyers and anyone who's working in this space, but also to anybody with a family member who might be vulnerable to this kind of scheme. So let's see here. That's just my overview. Here we go. So this is just some basic stats from the Census Bureau on the number of persons in the U.S. 65 and older and the projected up through 2060. And you can see it's just exponential, starting in 2000, jumping about 20 million into 2020, roughly where we are now, and then it's going to almost double by 2040 and continue to grow. Don't shoot the messenger on this one, folks, but this particular slide is age 65 and older, but in terms of elder fraud reporting, we consider anyone over age 60 to be in that category. So again, not my decision, but all right. So this is a perpetrator, a fraudster can wear many different hats. It could be power of attorney, guardianship abuse, what we're talking about a lot today. It could be unauthorized credit card use by family members or friends, extortion or threats by family member or friends. This takes the form of, mom or dad, if you don't help me out, I'm going to put you in an old person's home, or I'm going to get a guardian established, or something, type of threat like that. Forgery, misuse of healthcare funds, and nursing home theft. Obviously, folks in nursing home are also in danger of theft and abuse from members of the nursing home community. Predominantly, what we're talking about here today is strangers, outside actors. Many of them are foreign-based, overseas, that have agents here helping with these schemes. You probably all heard by this point of pig butchering. Is that something that's familiar to you folks? So that's really just a more recent term that describes a whole category of this type of fraud. And most of this fraud is phone-based, internet-based. It's any type of fraud where the fraudster starts by trying to get the victim's trust, either through dating sites or social media sites. And we're even seeing in terms of like online gaming, right? There's chat functions in many online gaming. They're using those chat functions in online gaming to become friends with people, a gaming friend. And that relationship then turns into something more where they ask for money. Oftentimes it's an investment opportunity. Other times it's helping out a friend. And it's called pig butchering because the idea is the fraudster fattens up the victim before the slaughter. So romance scams, very prevalent. Imposter scams, very prevalent. And I'll talk a little bit more about these. Lottery prize sweepstakes scams, another thing you'll see a lot of. Grandparent or relative in need scam. I prosecuted one of these recently where the targets here, the defendants here, it was an overseas-based call center. It was basically a warehouse full of individuals who were calling, 24/7 people from call lists they purchased on the dark web, and impersonating the victims' children, grandchildren, and asking for money. Don't tell mom. You can't tell mom that I'm in deep trouble. Please, please, please send money. You got to do it right away, and send it to these crazy accounts. And then investment scams and phishing and tech support scams. And I think the next one, right? If you guys see stuff like this, hopefully you're not clicking on the link, right? Now it seems kind of self-evident when you get a lot of spam in your mailbox that a lot of these are scams, but to a lot of folks who didn't grow up with the internet and didn't grow up with email, these all look legitimate, and they instill a lot of panic in people when they get them, and that often causes them to act rashly and quickly without thinking. And that's how a lot of these let us get started. One thing I wanted to do before I forget, and I do this a lot, can you all folks raise your hand if you have a family member or friend that's been victimized by an online or phone-based fraud scheme? Yeah, so you can look around. It's a large portion. Keep your hands up. Raise them again, and keep your hands up if the victim was we'll say an LD, over 65-year-old person. Right. So that's a large portion here. The official statistic I have, which is from 2017, so that's pretty dated now, is 1 out of every 18 cognitively intact community-dwelling older adults each year will experience financial fraud. I think that statistics from 2017 is way, way outdated. I think it's much, much higher than 1 in 18 by this point in time. So here are some common tactics to look out for. And it's what fraudsters use. It's some of these tactics are developed from telephone advertisers, from telemarketers, and it kind of has now moved over to telemarketing fraud. Disrupting rational thinking, right? You want to induce fear that interacts with rational thinking. You want to instill some sort of urgency or immediacy, and you want to fulfill a weakness, right? A desire to leave money to a family member or to help a family member, establishing a relationship with somebody, for folks that are lonely or feeling special for winning something. It's all kinds of sweepstakes this is a report. This is the latest version I have. It's an FTC, Federal Trade Commission report about protecting older consumers. And there's some interesting statistics in here about the types of fraud that are most prevalent. You can see here, I mean, romance scams alone. This is in terms of, folks, the dollar value, not necessarily the number of scams, but the dollar value that's been of the victims being defrauded. And you can see romance scams is by far and away, as of 2021, the highest group. And I think that's probably even increased by now here in 2025. Second only to business imposters and investment scams. Those are the age-old type of scams. But romance scams are really, really problematic. And they tend to target, or at least they're more successful with, older folks who maybe are widowed or without a spouse or a nearby family, and are just desperate and longing for human contact and a friendship, a relationship, and they prey on that to extort money. And they do so repeatedly. So this is some data we pulled from 2024 from a marketing grant that said the average number, if you're victimized once, the average number of times, total number of times you're victimized is 9, which means that a lot of folks are being victimized more than 9 times. So what the fraudsters typically do is they just keep defrauding the victim until the victim is either out of money or wises up or has a family member or someone or guardian step in to stop them. It's worth mentioning as well that there's a lot of government scams going on now. I say not scams by the government, but impersonating federal agencies like the IRS, Social Security Administration, the Postal Service, FTC, Medicare. There's some tips here you can give to folks that you're responsible for or that are friends and family members to try to root this out. These agencies are never going to ask you, first of all, you're rarely ever contacted out of the blue by phone or email. And if you are, they're not going to ask you to send cash or gift cards to the federal government, right? You think about your taxes. You can pay your taxes in primarily one of two ways. You can do a direct deposit through a legitimate website, or you can send a check. Fraudsters don't want that. They want fast money that they can distribute in an untraced way. So you're not going to get a text message from the Social Security Administration saying, we need money from you right away, or you owe us money. So be on the lookout for that. Now, the tricky thing is a lot of these agencies are having their numbers spoofed, meaning when you get the number, right, it looks like, oh, it's coming up the Social Security Administration is calling me. So it's no longer, you can't rely on the phone number alone to vet it. If you get that kind of call, if somebody comes to you and says, I got this call, what do I do? You find the legitimate agency contact information on the web, the US.gov website that's based on it, and you find the actual contact information, you call them and you ask about it. I can guarantee you that the federal government is not going to contact you and ask you to do something within 30 or 24 hours, right? That's an artificial response period. As you all probably know, perhaps to its fault, the federal government gives plenty of time to respond to inquiries. So anything that is being purported as urgent, that should be a major, major red flag. As to the, send us the money in gold or Bitcoin or anything like that. Right. So I think I covered some of these things. Right. Common scam payment methods. I've covered these. Wire transfers. Hey, Venmo me. Hey, it's the IRS. Can you Venmo me 10 grand you owe me from last year's taxes? No, that's a fraud. So I think I covered some of these. LTC. And I want to get to what to do when you come across this stuff. This is just another stat that we got that gives you the idea of if we're seeing these reported tens of millions of dollars of reported theft, what we're not seeing is even greater. For every one report we're getting, we're estimating that there's 43 instances of fraud that are not reported. Whether because the victim never figures out they've been scammed, they think they've just been jilted by a friend or a boyfriend, or because they're too embarrassed. Or, and this is a variation, it's somebody who is in a relationship, a married relationship or committed relationship, and is basically cheating online with somebody, is defrauded by the person they're cheating with, and then can't tell their spouse or their loved one where the money went. So they're in a state of denial that they've even lost the money. They're telling us, no, my money's still in Bitcoin. I can see it, it's right there. And we're telling them, no, it doesn't exist. You've been defrauded, and they just don't want to hear it. So what to do if you come across this? So here's my standard response, and here's what we tell everybody. One-stop shopping for abuse reporting, elder abuse reporting, and guidance is the Department of Justice has a national elder fraud hotline, and the number's up there, and I can make these slides available or make this information available. It's a toll-free number. You can call it. I don't think it's staffed 24/7, but it has pretty good hours. I called it this morning to make sure it still works. It does. I got a nice young man who told me all about all these services they offer. It does essentially two things. One, it's sort of a clearinghouse for reporting elder fraud. So you bring them the problem, they will get you to the right agency, the right federal agency, the FBI or the FTC, that can help you with your problem and that you can report that problem to. That's the first thing they can do. If you're the actual victim calling, if you authenticate yourself and you're the actual victim or have the victim on the line, they can actually assign a case agent. This is all free of charge, by the way. They can assign a case agent who will help the victim actually file the report. They can't file the report themselves, but if they have the victim's consent, they can help them file the report. Now, to be realistic and completely transparent, this is very important. It's very important to report these kind of frauds, and they ultimately get routed to a federal agency like the FBI, like the FTC, like the Secret Service, who does a lot of this work too. But there's a lag time there, right? So these come in, they get aggregated and sent to the agencies. Somebody's assigned to look at them. They go through them. They pick out the ones that maybe look, the most urgent or the biggest loss amounts or the most coherent, and they reach out to the victims. That can take weeks. The young man I spoke with today, I asked him, how long does it typically take for people to call you to get a call back from the FBI, for example? And this is just, anecdotal evidence. He said, week and a half, 2 weeks. So that's a long period of time in my universe when I'm trying to figure out how to prosecute the person who's doing this fraud. So brings us to, okay, so what the, let me go back one. So this elder fraud, I said it's sort of a clearinghouse. These are the reporting portals you can make directly. You can make this directly to FBI. They have an IC3 reporting portal, and I'll make this information available to everybody here. So if you kind of more savvy, you don't need to go through the hand-holding of the fraud hotline. You can make the report directly to the agency. It's going to get there faster. But what I'm going to tell you today, I'm dealing with, I think, a sophisticated audience of judges, guardians, lawyers, people that work in this space. Call the FBI directly. And if you're in my district, if you're one of the 9 counties that I mentioned, call me. Call our office and ask for me. I work in the economic crime unit. A call from a judge or a lawyer is going to be more, the information is going to be easier to get. It's going to carry more weight. It's going to get more attention. And it's going to allow us to get an agency involved quicker. And that's important because there are tools here we can use to get money back. Primarily, I'm charged with prosecuting the guys that are responsible. But as part of that, obviously, it's an obvious corollary is that we want to help get money back to the victims. And there's a couple great tools we have for doing them. And one of them is called, I don't have a slide for it. I have a handout. I've got a bunch of copies here. I can leave them up front if folks want to take them. And I can also circulate this flyer electronically. It's called a kill chain request. And a federal agency like the FBI, the Secret Service, can do this. It has to be done usually within 24 hours of a wire. But basically, if you're able to detect that your ward or the person that you're responsible for, a family member, has been victimized and has sent a wire, a bank wire that's fraudulent, made a fraudulent transfer, there are steps you can take. And if the government gets to the information within 24 hours, it can reverse the transaction. It can force the bank to move it back. I'd like to say this is frequent, but usually don't get the call within the window we need to do it. But it's important to know this tool is available, and you should be aware of it. There's basically 3 steps, and it's laid out. I won't cover everything in the flyer, but you need to contact your bank, then contact the police, and then contact law enforcement. And I provided the, at least for Philadelphia, the Secret Service main office and the FBI main office. For folks that are looking for the contact information for their county, I can help get that for you too. And I will provide my personal contact information again. We want to hear about this kind of fraud. I can't promise you we're going to prosecute or investigate every single call we get, but it's important for us to know what's out there. And your victim, the victim that you know, might be part of a much larger scam that we're already investigating. And so, it might seem small to you or there's no way we're going to catch these guys, but on our end, we might already be long, down the road of doing that. So the other thing we can do, and this isn't quite as time sensitive, but it's also needs to be done relatively quickly. We can trace proceeds. So if we know where the money was wired to, we can use subpoenas and forensics to follow that money, and we can even follow money into crypto. Now that doesn't always happen. Basically, with domestic legitimate banks, if they get a call from the FTC or the FBI that we believe an account has been used to defraud somebody, they're going to freeze that account for the short term to let us go get the search warrant or the seizure warrant we need to grab those funds. That's most cases, you don't need a whole lot of process there. Now, in the crypto space, there's only a handful of crypto exchanges, and they're the bigger ones. It's like Tether, Coinbase, I think Bitcoin, the ones you may have heard of. They will respect and respond to law enforcement freeze requests. Not in 100% case of the time, but most times they will. So if we can follow the proceeds, and I won't get into the technology of it. It's every Bitcoin or every cryptocurrency transaction has a digital fingerprint. Our agents can follow those digital fingerprints and follow out the quote wallet, the electronic wallet that those funds ultimately were put into. If they're one of the friendly exchanges, we can freeze those assets in the wallet and then get a seizure warrant. Even if we don't know who the bad guys are, we can get a seizure warrant from a federal judge to compel the exchange to return the money to the agency, and the agencies will give the money back to the victim. I've done probably half dozen of these in the last week. So it's a real thing. Again, we're we can only do so much. We only have so many resources. We're trying to do these type of seizure warrants where the amount of money is large, or where there's large amounts of victims in our district, or where there are repeat offenders involved. So there's a lot of factors go into it, but we do have the resources and tools to trace money, to grab proceeds, and to try to get it back to victims. I think that's all I have for now, but happy to take any questions at the appropriate time.
Okay. Before we open it up for questions, are there any of the presenters that would like to add anything to the discussion?
Yes, I did forget to mention that I also use the Social Security Death Index to find people. It's also a great resource. It's only good for people who have an issued Social Security number. So if the person doesn't have a Social Security number, you won't find them on there. I'm very jealous, Judge, that you have access to police can do a welfare check. We do not have that in Philadelphia. But I do have contacts over at Adult Protective Services, which is Liberty. I didn't know them. I never knew them. I called up and said, who can I talk to? Who can I email to find my people? They put me in touch with the assistant director. Her and I are now friends. I email her, do you have eyes on this person? Date of birth, Social Security number, name. She comes back, yes, I do. This is the responsible person, and this is where they live. Got it. I work at PCA, like I mentioned, so I do have contacts at PCA. Shout out to PCA in the back. I call them up for my people. Who's responsible for this person? Where are they at? Where can I find them? So I just try to use every resource available to me to besides the police department, which I would love, Judge Wood Skipper. But besides that, I try to use every resource available to me, no matter what it is. I don't take no for an answer.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, at the first summit that happened a year and a half ago, I spent a lot of time with the protective services workers who were there, and I learned a lot. And I since went back home and formed a good relationship with them, and they really are the first responders for guardianship and for elders in general. They have a trove of information, and they could use our help. And it's good to have a good relationship with them because they are the ones out there with mud in their boots actually dealing with people, and they can become a great resource. And it's a symbiotic relationship. If they have a person under investigation, report of need, and we have an active guardianship, I'm not going to know about that report of need. Guess what? We can help each other. So it's good to have that relationship.
About a month ago, I was investigating a case, and I emailed Adult Protective Services, which is Liberty, and they said, oh my goodness, we just got a report of need yesterday for this person. I knew it. I said, okay, and now we're on it. We had a review hearing with the judge, but I just was outreaching out to them, and they just got a report of need that day before. So it works. It works. If you use it, it works.
Judge Patkus?
I was just going to say, one of the best things Massachusetts did as part of the first Elder Justice Grant was we created an advisory committee. And on that advisory committee, we made sure we had all of the folks in Mass in this area that should be on that committee, because what was happening was, and that was APS, DPPC, as I said, many other organizations in Massachusetts that exist. And these are great people, but the court and these organizations were never communicating with one another. And you wouldn't believe what we found out. I mean, and it has been a huge change going forward, just having these relationships. We uncovered that in 2021, Massachusetts actually passed a law that allowed, I believe it was APS, or it might have been DPPC, to create a registry of caretakers who have been found by their organization to be involved in abuse and neglect. Unfortunately, judges and the court itself was not at that time part of the legislation that allows them to provide us with that information. But because of this relationship and having this communication, we're going to make efforts to have that law add in the court, so that we make sure that we don't mistakenly go ahead and appoint somebody to be guardian that is on this registry to no longer, or at least for 5 years, be involved in any type of caretaking. I understand what you're saying, and it's really good to have that back and forth.
Judge Hughes?
One of the things, I don't think we mentioned it, but as you know, many of the guardians, especially the professional guardians, work in many counties. And one of the things that is very helpful now is when one county uncovers a problem, it gets shared with the other counties now. So we can immediately get ahead of it before it might be happening in our own county.
All right. Thank you very much for your attention. A round of applause for our presenters.